Thank you all for joining us tonight. And this is a talk on how to be an ally in support of Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is November 20th of every year. And it is the last day of Transgender Awareness Week. And to start off, I want to start this presentation talking about Transgender Day of Remembrance 2020. Between October 1st, 2019 and September 30th, 2020, 350 transgender and gender diverse people were murdered worldwide. The youngest of these victims were 15 years old. The following slides will consist of the names of those murdered between these dates in the United States. You can find the list of all 350 names at transrespect.org. Brianna B.B. Hill, 30 years old. Nikki Kunhausen, 17 years old. Yahira Nesby, 33 years old. Mia Perry, 26 years old. Dustin Parker, 25 years old. Monica Diamond, 34 years old. Lexi, 33 years old. Johanna Metzger, 25 years old. Una Pop, 28 years old. L.A. J. O'Regan, 20 years old. Jane Thompson, 33 years old. Tony McDade, 38 years old. Selena Reyes Hernandez, 37 years old. Raya Milton, 25 years old. Dominique Remy Fells, 27 years old. Brian Egypt Powers, 43 years old. Brayla Stone, 17 years old. Mercy Mack, 22 years old. Shockey Peters, 32 years old. Bree Black, 27 years old. Summer Taylor, 24 years old. Marilyn Cazares, 22 years old. Tiffany Harris, 32 years old. Queisha D. Hardy, 22 years old. Aja Raquel Roan Spears, 32 years old. Key Sam, 24 years old. Ariane Burnett, 37 years old. Mia Green, 29 years old. And I want to point out that a lot of these names are transgender women of color. To start tonight's presentation, I want to start with a content warning that this presentation includes a talk of genitals by name, as parts in terms of genitalia is often used in describing transgender non-binary identities, and these terms are important to be able to fully discuss the topic. You'll also see an example of a transgender person, and their fictional name is Felix. And you'll see that person throughout our presentation to be able to explain concepts a little bit better. Some important terms to start out with. Cisgender is someone who identifies with their gender they were assigned at birth. So when you were born and the doctor said that your sex was male, that your gender, your parents identified that you were a male, and you've always felt male, you'd be cisgender. A transgender person is someone who identifies with a gender that is not their gender they were assigned at birth. So they might be assigned female at birth and identify as male, genderqueer, agender, etc. Non-binary is any gender that is not male or female. I just want to note that technically the non-binary falls under the transgender umbrella, but not all non-binary folk identify as transgender, and that's an individual choice. We're going to go over some terms that get confused quite often. So gender identity versus gender expression. Gender identity is how an individual identifies, whether it be female, male, non-binary, etc. Our example of our fictional person, Felix identifies as agender. And agender means that they do not feel as though they have a gender. And we'll get to more definitions of different identities in a little bit. Gender expression is the external manifestation of the person's gender identity. These don't need to align with societal gender roles, and societal gender roles can vary by culture. So folx expresses themselves in a feminine way. And another way to see this is someone may be a transgender man, but they present feminine, but they're still a man. So just because one is a man does not mean they have to present masculine. So the male is the identity, the feminine part is the expression. So some different types of gender expressions. Androgynous is an individual who expresses themselves with a combination of masculine and feminine characteristics. Feminine is people who have qualities or appearances traditionally associated with women within their culture. Gender neutral is individuals whose gender expression is different from conventional expectations of masculinity and femininity. That can mean androgynous, or it can mean different things to different people. You're going to hear me say that a lot during this presentation, as gender, like sexuality, is a spectrum and fluid, and it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. And then masculine means people who have qualities or appearances traditionally associated with men within their culture. Sex versus gender. I'm pretty sure everyone has heard this big debate. This is what people use when they're being transphobic a lot. So I think these are important terms to understand. Sex is the biological differences designated at birth as either male or female based on genitalia, genetics, or hormones. And male and female aren't the only sexes to exist. There's more than XX and XY chromosomes. And so in the trans and non-binary community, we generally refer to these as assigned sex at birth. So someone who was assigned female at birth will say that they're AFAB, and someone who's assigned male at birth will say they're AMAB, which is a shorter way of expressing more about yourself. And gender, on the other hand, is an individual's concept of themselves. So our fictional character Felix is AFAB, assigned female at birth, but is agender. So again, your sex at birth does not need to correlate with your gender. So you've heard a lot about transitioning probably, or you've at least heard the phrase transitioning. There's actually two different types of transitioning. There's medical transitioning and social transitioning. Medical transitioning is what you've probably heard of more. So this is things that can help the people feel more comfortable with their gender and identify with their gender more. Not all trans and non-binary people go through transition. It is not a requirement to go through transition to be trans or non-binary. And a term you might have heard is called dysphoria, which is, it's a bit of a hard concept to explain, but it's things that you have on your body now that don't match your gender. So this might be an assigned female at birth's person's breast make them uncomfortable and dysphoric, because that is not a part of who they are and how they see themselves. And being dysphoric is not necessary to be transgender or non-binary. So some types of medical transition, ones that most people probably have heard of, is called hormone replacement therapy, shortened to HRT, which is testosterone or estrogen. I know more about the transmasculine side of this, so I can talk about that a little bit more in detail. So testosterone comes in two forms mostly: injection, which is either intramuscular in the thigh or subcutaneous in the stomach. In the United States, the person would take a shot once a week. And I know at least the UK, it's usually every 3 weeks or every 3 months. And then estrogen, the other form of testosterone is a gel, and you rub it on your shoulder and your back. near shoulder blades, and instead of taking the shots. And then estrogen, I believe, just comes in pill form. I don't know too much about that, but that's the other form. So testosterone would be people assigned female at birth, and to look more masculine, and estrogen would be for assigned male at birth people to look more feminine. Top surgery, AFAB person assigned female at birth person might have their breast removed, while an assigned male at birth person may have breast implants. I've heard from assigned male at birth people that insurances don't often, at least in the United States, cover top surgery for them, because breast will grow naturally once they are on estrogen, and unless the breast growth does not correlate to their body size and type, insurance usually won't cover it. But insurances are starting to cover top surgery for assigned female at birth folks more. It's the same thing as a mastectomy, pretty much. So bottom surgery in assigned female at birth may have surgery to create a penis, while an assigned male at birth person will have surgery to create a vagina. For the assigned female at birth folk, the names of these are phalloplasty and metoidoplasty. A phalloplasty takes grafts from either the forearm or the thigh, usually, to create the penis. Well, metoidoplasty, so when someone starts testosterone, there's a thing called bottom growth, which is when the clitoris grows in length and diameter, so that the size that is already there from that bottom growth is just used. There's no grafting or anything else. Socially transitioning is something that people might not think of too much as part of the transitioning phase, but this is usually where people start their transition, because medical transition wait lists can be very long. People can wait either months or years on a wait list just to get a consultation and then be on the list again for surgery. Finances, very expensive. Without insurance, sorry. It can be up to $15,000 to get top surgery. So those are some reasons why people usually start socially transitioning, and often medical practitioners, even for testosterone and for surgeries, will require that you have been in gender therapy for a certain amount of time, and that they want a letter from your therapist stating that you've been in therapy, this is the right move for you, this is what you want, you understand the implications. So that takes time too. So some ways socially transitioning can happen is changing their name. So trans and non-binary folk refer to a name given at birth, which is whatever your parents called you when you were born, as their dead name or their birth name. So people use dead name because their name at birth is triggering to them, and it's just not a name that they want to be associated with. Some other people use birth name when it's just maybe not a name that fits them and their gender identity, but there's no trigger there or harsh feelings, so they just call it their birth name. But again, up to the individual what they want to call it and the reasoning for that. They might change their pronouns. They might start going by he, him, he, they, she, her, they, them, she, they, it, its, etc. And we'll get to neopronouns in a little bit. When people have multiple pronouns, as in he/they or she/they, they're there because they want you to use both. So don't always default to the binary of he or she out of those two. You can do it by combining them, saying he had a good time yesterday, they really liked the ice cream we got, something like that. And then they might change their gender expression, which earlier we said is the external manifestation of their gender. So they might start presenting more masculine with masculine haircut, using a binder to flatten their chest. A binder, in simple terms, is like a super sports bra. It is important to do this safely and get a safe made binder. but it flattens your chest. And using a packer is either a silicone fake penis or a foam insert to make the bulge. And they might get the voice lessons, etc. So pronouns. This is something everyone's probably been hearing a lot about over the last year as people are becoming more accepting of it and using it more. First off, always use the person's pronouns that they ask. And some questions you might have are, what if I don't know their pronouns? You can start by sharing yours. When you meet someone, you can say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and my pronouns are this. And then you can say, what's your name and what are your pronouns, or how can I address you? This is really helpful in a group setting, so you're not singling anyone out or accidentally outing someone as trans non-binary. Even though you don't mean it, accidentally outing someone can be very dangerous for that person's safety. What do you do if you use the wrong pronouns? Just apologize, correct yourself, and move on. Don't profusely apologize and make things awkward. If you start profusely apologizing, that person might feel the need to console you, and it's not about you in that moment. You're the one who messed up, and that's okay. You're going to mess up. Everyone's going to mess up, but it's not the time to put it on you. So you just say, I'm sorry, and then start using the correct pronouns. So an example of someone using the wrong pronouns with our friend Felix. Felix was there yesterday. He had a really good time. So you can just change it right there in the sentence. Or if someone goes, hey, use she, her, my pronouns are he, him, you say, sorry, I'll make sure to get it right next time. Then make sure to get it right. And then you can just use the next time you use pronouns with that person. And as an ally, you might want to correct someone for using the wrong pronoun for someone, but unless you've been giving prior consent to do this, it's better not to. It can make things embarrassing or awkward for some. They might be out to you and their friends or people on the internet, and then you get in front of their family or coworkers who they're not out to yet. It can make the situation really awkward and force them to come out or be in an unsafe situation. So you can simply, if you know the situation is safe and that instead of pointing out, saying, interrupting conversation, saying, hey, you used the wrong pronouns, you're going to start saying it in your own speech. So an example here, person one, she's great, we have class together. You can say, oh, you have class with Felix? You're right, he is really great. What if I can't ask someone's pronouns? It's best to default to they, them, which is the gender neutral, or you can just use someone's name in place of their pronouns. So neopronouns, I just mentioned briefly by name before. I just want to point out that they, them is not a neopronoun. It is just on this chart as an example. So neopronouns are generally newer gender-neutral pronouns, typically from the 20th century, but some date back even farther to the 18th century and so on. These are new to me too. These are something I'm learning even as a transgender person myself. I don't personally know too many people who use these, and this list is just examples. There are many, many more out there. But again, if you don't know it or how to pronounce it, I've gotten that question a few times, how do I pronounce these? Google it. Google should be your first stop, or if you know someone who is farther along the ally path than you, is to ask them. And then if it is someone who you are close to, maybe it's your friend, your child, you can ask them next if you still need some help. So you can just ask them, hey, I have a question about how to pronounce your pronouns and how to use them correctly. Would you be okay having this conversation? But always give them an out. So if they might not want to talk about it, you can add something to the end, such as, hey, I have a question about how to pronounce your pronouns and use it. Would you be okay talking about that sometime? If not, we could talk about the new movie coming out for Christmas. That way they can just start talking about the Christmas movie instead of awkwardly having to say no. because I know, at least for myself, saying no can be really awkward, especially with topics like this, and you feel like you have to say yes even when you don't want to. So an example here, I do know how to pronounce the Z-zer one, so I'll use that, and that is right here. So Z laughed, I called Zer, Zer eyes gleam, that is Zers, Z likes the Zer self. Honorifics, this might be new to people, but the most commonly used gender-neutral honorific is MX, which is pronounced mix, or mix with a K instead of MIX, MIK. Like pronouns and everything else, this is becoming more well-known over the last year or so. I've been starting to see this option on forms I fill out, which is really nice. But a lot of forms don't have this. Like a lot of forms don't have pronouns. So this is something to keep in mind. Like I said before, when you can't ask someone their pronouns to default to they, them, you can start defaulting to MX when you don't know what their honorific should be. And then things allies should know. That gender is complex. It's going to take time and research to fully understand. This is the case for people questioning their gender. From personal experience, I'm still doing this. I started out researching for a friend who told me they were non-binary and I wanted to be there for them. And there's new stuff coming out all the time. I just started learning about neopronouns over the last couple months. So this is just one of those things that are going to take time. Like point 2 says, you're going to make mistakes. It's inevitable. You just have to accept it's going to happen. Just apologize and ask for guidance. Like I said before, first places to ask for guidance is Google or someone farther along the ally path than you. It's not a transgender non-binary person's job to teach the cisgender world all things gender. We get a lot of questions like this, just like the rest of the LGBTQ plus community, where people just expect us to answer these questions, and it can be very uncomfortable and a burden to have to always do this and feel like this question's always going to be coming. So Google has tons of information. Places like Trans Training Institute, the Human Rights Group, ACLU, all of them are going to have good places to look for these. There's an online article publisher called Them. They have a lot of good stuff too. So number 3 is ask questions in a way that allows the person to decide if they want to answer or not. Like I was saying before, you can say, would it be okay to ask about X topic sometime? Or give them the out where they can just start talking about the other subject. Hey, I have a question about X topic, but if you want to talk about it right now, we can talk about that cool new action movie coming out soon. What questions should you avoid? Don't ask about surgical statuses or body parts. This includes whether or not they've had bottom surgery, top surgery, what kind of genitals they were born with, what kind they have now. This is a really uncomfortable question, as current body parts can be very triggering to people, as in a man having breasts, a trans man having breasts, it can be very triggering. So you wouldn't ask your cisgender friends what's in their pants. It's weird. Don't ask anybody that. Those are just general societal off-limits topics. Don't ask to see pre-transition photos or ask what their birth or dead name was. This can be very triggering. I have a few transgender friends that I've known for over a year. I have no idea what their birth names were, and we're very close, but that's not my place to ask. If they ever want to tell me, I'll thank them for wanting to share that with me, but it's not my place to ask that. And don't ask when someone became transgender. You don't just become transgender. It's like when people ask when people became gay, lesbian, bisexual. You don't just become these things. You are these things. And don't ask how they have sex. If, like I said, if it's going to be weird to ask, literally any other person the question. It's not okay to ask transgender or non-binary people, no matter how bad you want to know. If you really have to know, you can Google it. There's probably numerous answers out there, but don't ask people. So 5 positive ways to be a trans ally. Accept that people have the right to define their gender, regardless of assigned sex. Respect people's gender identifications, pronouns, and names. Challenge anti-trans or sexist remarks, jokes, and comments through personal conversation. Listen to the stories of people who are trans to better understand themselves, but better understand their experiences. And say that you're a trans ally and tell people why. So this is called the gender unicorn. It's a good way to visualize your own identities, but I thought this would be a good way to bring all these concepts together that we've gone over so far. So we're going to be using our friend Felix for this. So as you can see, up here we have gender identity. And Felix identifies as other. Like I said earlier, they identify as agender. So Felix uses he, they pronouns and identifies as transgender gender expression. They express themselves both in a masculine and feminine manner. He may mix them together one day, or feel more masculine one day, feminine the next. Felix may feel masculine for months on end, and then start feeling feminine for 3 days, and then go back to being masculine for 4 days. It can all, like I said, it's fluid, it's a spectrum. Sex assigned at birth. He was assigned female at birth. Who you're physically and emotionally attracted to aren't a part of your gender identity, being transgender or non-binary, but it's a part of the gender unicorn, so I thought I'd just include it quick. These are going to be talked about in later episodes of this series about different sexualities and romantic identities. So Felix is physically attracted to all genders, so he considers himself pansexual. They only are emotionally attracted to women and other genders, so they consider themselves biromantic. If you noticed, I said that Felix uses he and they pronouns, and throughout talking about Felix, I use both of those pronouns. So the next section is personal comments from the transgender non-binary community about what their gender identity means to them, since there are definitions of each identity, but what it actually means to each person will vary. We'll start off with demiboy and demigirl. A demigirl, by definition, is a gender identity describing someone who's partially, but not wholly, identifies as female, girl, or otherwise feminine. The quote, "Being a demigirl means that I still feel some connection with being female, but not entirely. So I consider myself partially female, but the rest of me is non-binary. I prefer using she, her, and they, them pronouns. I also changed my name to something more gender neutral because it's more comfortable for me." Demiboy, on the other hand, by definition, is a gender identity describing someone who's partially, but not wholly, identifies as man, boy, or otherwise masculine. Quote, "For me, demiboy is having only the loosest connections to masculinity. I don't feel masculine in almost every way, but little things like attire and pronouns and stuff I have kept. It would be odd wearing other clothes. So pretty much only the superficial presentation aspects of gender." Transgender, by definition, as we said earlier, is identifying as a gender that is not one that you were assigned at birth. So the quote here is, "I'm not the gender I was assumed to be." Transmasculine, shortened to transmasc. And then there's also transfeminine, which will just be the same definition, but you'll insert the terms assigned male at birth and feminine, which I can go over in a second. So it's a term to describe transgender people who were assigned female at birth, but identify with masculinity to a greater extent than femininity. Transmasc for me means identifying strongly as being masculine and presenting masculine, but not being a trans male. Transfeminine, on the other hand, I don't have the quote for it, but Definition is a transgender person who is assigned male at birth, but identifies with femininity to a greater extent than masculinity. Genderqueer is an umbrella term similar to non-binary. This identity can include a combination of genders, neither man nor woman, moving between genders, those who do not or cannot place a name to their gender, or having an overlap or blurred lines between gender identity. We have 2 quotes for this one. The first, identify with genderqueer because I'm a bit whatever about gender. I'm definitely outside the binary somewhere, but I can't really place exactly where. I can best describe my gender as someone shrugging at something. The second quote, I love the term genderqueer because it really sparks how my gender feels. It's queer. My gender is gay, it's butch, it's campy, and other, and weird. My gender is radically opposed to the gender binary and is not interested in any sanitized ideal third gender category filled with perfectly androgynous skinny white people. Genderqueer is radically inclusive of all the weird gender that we queers express. It includes butches, sissies, and fairies, and drag performers, cross-dressers, and transvestites, and yes, non-binary people too. Agender, which is, we talked about our fictional person Felix identifying as agender, can be seen as a non-binary identity or as a statement of not having a gender identity. So in other words, the person does not feel as though they have a gender at all. 2 quotes here is, it means I distance myself from being a man or a woman. I'm just me. I don't feel as if I am any gender. I feel like a sort of nebulous being without any strong connections to being a man or woman. Non-binary describes any gender identity which is not fit the male or female binary spectrum. We have 2 quotes here. Non-binary, I'm neither male or female, but I have a different gender outside the binary. To me, being non-binary is freeing yourself from the strict male-female binary that society tries to cram everyone in. If I try to put a specific label on my identity, then I'm putting myself into another box, and that makes me feel trapped. Gender fluid and gender flux. These are 2 different identities. I just put them on the same slide, and I'll talk about the differences at the end. Gender fluid is people who feel that their strengths of their gender or genders change over time. Quote here is, I don't stick to one gender all the time. Every morning I ask myself, am I a man, woman, neither? And go with whatever has the most positive response in my emotions. I don't present any other way. When I'm in any other gender, it's something that goes on inside my head, something I need to know for myself. Gender flux is gender intensities change over time. My gender identity is fluid, flux, transmasc. Those are all different identities. You can identify with multiple gender identities. Identify mostly as a man, but also somewhat as non-binary. My gender fluctuates between being masculine and androgynous. The intensity of my gender also fluctuates. So gender fluid versus gender flux. Gender fluid means that someone has different genders or multiple genders that change over time. So that means they might feel masculine and feminine. They can identify as male and female, or just non-binary and feel masculine and feminine, and that changes over time with feeling the one gender one day, the other gender the next. Like the quote said, waking up and deciding what response you get with your emotions about if you feel a man, woman, or neither that day. Gender flux, on the other hand, is having the one gender. This is just an example of how one can use it. It's having the one gender that changes intensity over time. So let's say that someone is transmasculine, how masculine they feel is going to change over time. So they might feel 100% masculine on Monday, and then on Thursday they're feeling 0% masculine and just don't really feel any gender at all. So it's important to talk about the hardships. So some hardships that trans non-binary folk face. According to the Human Rights Watch, as of April 2020, I made this presentation in August, I believe. So from April, as of April 2020, so that's 4 months into the year, 22 states do not prohibit discrimination based on gender identity. The lack of protection in this can lead to unemployment, leading to poverty. Like other parts of the LGBTQ plus community, transgender and non-binary folks suffer from harassment and stigma. Human Rights Watch says in 2019, advocates tracked at least 27 deaths of transgender and non-gender non-conforming people in the U.S. due to fatal violence, and the majority of people whom were Black transgender women. We heard some of those names tonight from October of last year to September of this year. In 2020, when I made this presentation, I believe the number was at 32 or 35, which was in August or September. So we surpassed last year's numbers before the year's even gone. And there has been more deaths, murders since then of transgender and gender nonconforming people in the United States. And like I said earlier, there's been 350 worldwide. In 2020, Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act was rewritten. This means that health providers and insurance companies that receive federal funding don't have to provide the same access, coverage, and services and care to transgender people. These are some of the references. And that's it for the presentation tonight. Just wanted to thank you for joining me and for anything you have done for Transgender Awareness Week or Transgender Day of Remembrance. This is a part of a larger series that We the World Human Rights Campaign is working on. So like I said, there will be more How to Be an Ally episodes about different parts of the LGBTQ plus community. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. I hope you all have a wonderful night.